Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I've listened to the show a couple of times. It's really good, so I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so first and foremost, just help me and any listeners out there who may not know, bring us up to speed a little bit. What is PushPay exactly?
Yeah, PushPay is in the church tech industry, and I best describe that as a CRM mixed with payment processing for donations, and this is all for churches and nonprofits. So if you think about churches, they basically act as like an entire small community, right? They have schools, they have groups, they have events. Some have thousands of congregants. So to run an organization as complex as that, you need a lot of software, and that's basically where PushPay comes in.
And I would imagine having software that you feel like you can trust, and once it's super integrated into so many aspects of that community, it's probably really important. So the content that you put out probably plays a really big role in building that trust. So it kind of makes the case study that we're about to dig in here a little bit more interesting and relevant with this aspect of building trust with your audience and internally with your stakeholders. So I don't want to give too much away. So again, for the first segment of our show, we're doing a case study. And today we're talking all about how you introduced more creative storytelling through the various types of content that you put out. So tell us more about what was going on at PushPay when you realized something needed to change.
Sure. I've been a product marketer for over 8 years. I worked across multiple industries. But I started at PushPay a little bit over a year ago, and this was my first time working at church tech. Never been anything in close to church tech before, and I took a look at a lot of our content outputs from product marketing, and a lot of it was safe to the point of kind of making me fall asleep, right? Which is never really a good sign in marketing. It was a lot of stock photos or stock videos of people hugging in churches, a lot of cliches, a lot of those terms that we all love, the transforms, the revolutionize, some of the generic benefits of save time and money. And as a part of my competitive research, I looked at our competitors, and a lot of them were doing the same thing. Honestly, to the point that if you just switched out the logos between different content and ours, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, which in marketing is really the last thing you want to do. If you want to be anything in marketing, it's to be different.
Absolutely. And I feel like I personally have been here before, probably multiple times, to be honest, where you feel like you're that stock content that you're referring to. I would bet every B2B marketer out there listening right now has experienced that with their own brand and cannot resist the urge to purge it as soon as possible. So how did you approach that situation? You're looking around, you're seeing all this stock stuff, and you're realizing this isn't making us stand out in a good way. What was your task at hand as you evaluated all of this?
Yeah, really the task was to make the content more interesting. How do we make customers care about our marketing? How do we make customers feel something when they see a piece of our content? How do we get them to start, engaging on social media? And kind of most importantly, what can we actually get away with? We are marketing to churches after all, so there's some lines that you just can't cross, right? I think there is a misconception out there that churches are more uptight and maybe wouldn't like funny, but I promise you, your average church administrator is spending their free time on TikTok and looking at memes just like the rest of us. Everybody likes funny, but for this group, we need to be respectful of certain things. So part of the challenge is kind of finding where that line was.
Right. So I would guess a lot of experimentation. And again, I can't help but thinking, just as you're talking, that trust aspect to me just would keep popping up, and even as you're explaining, you're trying to find where the line is, because you don't want to lose their trust. You want to keep their trust, but you want to also ignite some emotional connection. And a lot of this is from a content perspective, and with marketing, it's all empirical, right? You can see it and believe it. We know, I can look at stock photos and know that this isn't genuine. This isn't authentic. You saw that when you went in and, started evaluating this stuff. So I'm curious, as you were seeing all the empirical evidence of all of this, were there any metrics or measures that kind of signaled to you that okay, I can see that we have all these stock photos. I know that that's off just because that is one of my guiding principles as a marketer. But was there anything else from a metrics or, was it revenue? Was it pipeline? Was it engagement? Was there anything else that was kind of slipping or just not hitting where you needed it to hit?
Yeah. And engagement on our launches probably wasn't the best, on both like pen note guide notifications and email open rates and things of that nature. We had product videos that maybe get, 1 to 2 likes on social. So these situations, I like to look at who in the industry is actually making noise. What are they actually giving our target audience that we, probably aren't? PushPay, is the market leader in the industry, but we have a crazy amount of competitors. And one competitor in particular, they weren't taking a lot of business or anything like that, but they were generating a lot of buzz and getting more attention. And I was looking at the product, and the product itself like really wasn't half as good as ours. So that situation, I'm asking myself, okay, so what are they doing to actually get that attention? And a lot of it was because they had this, young, good-looking founder, and he was, very brash and sold a vision very well. So while the product may have not been as good, he made customers feel like they were part of this big, movement to reinvent church tech. And that kind of marketing of a brand centered around like a charming founder really broke through the noise of the kind of the endless competition out there. So in that situation, I had to ask myself, okay, so how can we also get prospects to care? How do we make ourselves stand out? How do we tap into appealing to those same human elements that was making our own competitor appealing?
Yeah, I like that you didn't immediately jump into like a copycat strategy, which does happen a lot with marketers, right? Like, let's put our founder out there. And, because oh my gosh, I've been there with another company where they were so obsessed with the competition. It just started looking like a Me Too rather than something that's authentic, different, connected. So how did you do it? Like, how did you inspire the company to make a really big, bold move that was differentiated but didn't cross the line?
Yeah, I think anytime you want to make any kind of changes, you have to establish credibility first. So, I was walking into PushPay. The first thing I wanted to do was, kind of crush it with some easy wins across departments, such as updating some sales enablement pieces, improving communication in a few areas. And then about, 1 to 2 months into the company, I talked to a few stakeholders, my boss, a few others, and just kind of like outlined what I learned so far by analyzing our market and our competitor efforts, and offered a couple ideas for making our product videos just a little bit more fun. And after getting that buy-in, I kind of slowly turned up the heat. I'm a big fan of the frog and the boiling pot analogy. If you really try to go crazy, all at once with your content, you're going to get kind of shut down probably by the stakeholders. It's better to start small and keep pushing a little bit each time and kind of prove your strategy, your credibility. And then once you can do that, you kind of dial it up more. So I worked with our videographer, and we started slowly kind of gradually moving away from the street, kind of talking head videos and some of the stock footage, and just adding a little bit more movement, being a little bit more playful. I started using like a whiteboard and using kind of fun drawings to kind of explain concepts, just kind of make it a little bit more, appealing. And then after that, we've actually been graduating to more complex skits recently, kind of putting ourselves in the customer's shoes and tell stories in more of a more fun and engaging way.
Yeah. It sounds like a very similar style to some of the videos that you put out on product marketing, that skit style, which not very many brands do. And the ones that do, it can either go like really cheesy and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to be cheesy. I'm cheesy sometimes, but it's hard to nail that and get it right. So I guess just real quick, like before we jump into a playbook, tell us what happened at the end. Like after, it's probably still ongoing, but once you started to do some of the more bolder pieces of content, what was the result of some of that?
Yeah. And first off, I think cheesy can be good. I think cheesy, especially now in the days of AI and content saturation and all of those things, cheeses and adding a little human element can actually be a good thing. Actually, kind of a bonding experience with your customers. So I would push back on the element that maybe cheesy is always bad. So it can actually be a pretty powerful marketing agent. But in this situation, the first good sign was that people were just kind of talking about our content, right? I was just getting those little things like, oh, that whiteboard was actually pretty cool. I love the way that you kind of explained that complicated concept. That was pretty interesting. And then for metrics, we saw increases in email click-through rates, average time spent, our in-app guides went up, and our launches actually started increasing our leads as well. So I was looking at those different aspects. And even recently, a prospect actually messaged me on LinkedIn saying that a recent skit video was actually hilarious. I like PushPay so much more now. So it's even those small things, like even when a prospect like tells you that they're gonna consider PushPay in a more positive light. I think that's something that I was really proud of to hear.
Yeah, it's all validation that you are building trust with the customer, with the community that surrounds your product. So yeah, I feel like every B2B marketer out there right now has dreamt about doing something like this, like taking the boring B2B content and making it more bold and more creative and having a stronger connection. And what a huge compliment to actually have a customer reach out to you saying that they liked your content. Like, customers don't do that. Like, they don't pay a marketer a compliment like that, at least not very often. So that's really cool. Okay, so now I want to jump into turning this into a playbook. So if someone is sitting out here thinking like, okay, my content is really boring, but my company would never go for bold, or it would be really hard to do that. Where do I start? Like, what would step one be for the marketer who's kind of stuck in that situation?
Yeah, step one is definitely, deeply understand your customer, and like my aspect, I probably use a lot of humor, and humor is really one of the more like powerful marketing tools that you can use. But what people find funny varies across different demographics and industries, right? So I would strongly recommend to get to know your customers, interview them, hop on sales calls, attend events, et cetera. And for me, I have a few customers now that I'm kind of close with. So if I have a little bit more of a wacky idea, I'll just ask them and run it by them first. Like, hey, would you find this funny? Does this speak
awesome
to you? And
yes.
I'll kind of take
it's like your
little
account. Built-in message testing.
Yeah, my little built-in message tester, and then I'll kind of take their feedback and kind of adjust from there. And they've stopped me from making bad decisions before, so I always appreciate their feedback.
That's awesome. Okay, so assuming that most creative content has that emotional connection, and like, I guess, how do you actually get closer to that emotional layer of your customer? How do you find it? I mean, you mentioned kind of doing a little bit of the message testing. Like, is there anything more in that understanding your customer step that you do to make sure you are emotionally connecting?
So what I'll say here is go beyond the basics, right? So everyone defaults to the values of their products and just a few cliches of save time and money. But those benefits don't actually elicit emotion. So try to go a little bit deeper. And I'll use it an example here. So let's say you're marketing a sales coaching software to sales managers. And I know this audience well. I was a former seller, so I can speak to it a little bit. A service level of pain would be using that sales coaching software to hit your pipeline numbers, right? That's how the generic output of what most marketers would use. But that's really the boring story here. So let's go a little bit deeper. What actually bothers a sales manager on an emotional level? It's probably being stuck in meetings 7 hours a day, doing endless forecasting, and basically not having enough time to coach their reps, which is why they probably became a sales manager in the first place, is actually to do that coaching. So if you're telling the story of this sales coaching software, appeal to that negative emotion of a before state of really being stuck in meetings, not being there for your reps when they're struggling and they need you, and then tell the after state story of using that coaching software to regain time back, create structure, and becoming the caring manager that really they always wanted to be. So that's really just one example, but just always dig deeper than that surface level and think about what actually bothers your customers on that emotional level.
Yeah, I love that you called out, and I'm going to steal this from you. Don't worry, I'll give you credit in the future. The boring benefits. That's why you just uncovered it. That's why B2B is boring.
Yeah.
Because it is. But
there are some shining examples, but yes, by and large, it is boring, which makes standing out fun, actually, and actually makes it a little easier. So it does.
It does make it easier. It's like counterintuitive because it's hard it's hard to get there, but then once you get there, it's way more fun. Okay, so step one was understand your customers. What's step two? What's the next step?
Yeah, so back to boiling the frog, like I talked about a little bit earlier. So don't turn the heat up all at once. And this is both for internal and external purposes. So internally, if you go crazy and you haven't built credibility first, you're going to get shut down fast. I've been there before. You got to have that street cred first before you can have that trust. And externally, you may not know your target audience as well as you think, and you could face major blowback if you haven't tested some smaller things first. So I always advocate for dialing up the heat, testing it, getting metrics, establish yourself, and then to continue to kind of keep pushing a little bit further each time.
Got it. Okay. So what you're explaining is sounding like mini experiments, right? Like going a little bit further, seeing what works. Was that really deliberate for you? Or was it kind of is that just kind of how you operate? Or I'm imagining, do you have like a strategy, like with a content, calendar? Talk me through what that looks like for you.
I mean, at PushPay, I always knew our end goal was to make entertaining content. I'm a little more wacky and fun in my personality. So I knew that's always like the end goal. But there's different types of wacky and fun, like I'm talking about, and knowing your audience, especially when you're marketing to a more, conservative audience like we are. So for me, it's kind of have a plan on how to escalate that boldness, right? It's the speed. It's how we're going to be bold, exactly determined by those testing metrics. So I always want to get bold, but how I'm getting there and the speed of it and everything like that is going to vary by the situation and what the tests are telling us at the time.
Got it. Okay. But you had these little experiments to gradually turn up the heat, so to speak, on boldness. And you said that was intentional, both internally and externally, which I think is so smart because you don't want to, especially in the type of market that may be a little bit more just generally, broadly speaking, risk averse. So yeah, it's smart to do that so you don't totally shock your audience internally and externally. And it sounds like it would be, if I were to try to replicate this strategy a bit, putting together like a mini experiments on, okay, where should I draw the line in the sand? And then also, as you mentioned, like have a customer or two that's a friendly customer who can kind of give you guidance on like, no, not funny, or like too risky, can kind of help guide you on like how bold you should go with some of those mini experiments. I guess like what's next after I have all those things in place as I'm like running experiments? Is it just kind of execution? Kind of like, walk me through where do I go next?
I would say prepare to handle like objections. You're going to face questions. Is this off brand? Does this match your current marketing guidelines? A lot of people just don't like change. So some people will feel a little uneasy about anything different than what we've been currently doing. So I'd be prepared to answer those objection questions and be able to back it up with the metrics that you've been kind of accumulating as you've been doing the testing along the way.
Yeah. One thing that I've done I haven't done this kind of experiment, but I've done other kinds of experiments in my marketing career. And one thing that I found works really well, I didn't necessarily think about it for objection handling. So that's a really good perspective on it. But one thing that I found that it helps to keep my stakeholders happy is to tell them that I'm going to run an experiment and why, and what it's going to tell us. Not necessarily what the experiment outcome will be, but at least like it's going to inform us on what. Like that's the kind of thing that I would do. And then I would conduct the experiment. And then I would go back again and be like, hey, remember that experiment I told you about? Like, here are the results. And then here's what I'm going to do next based on that. And I found that work really well. I love having all of those metrics in for objection handling. Feels like it would help, but also I could see that being such a, just a bummer, buzzkill, like, losing momentum. Like, how did you handle that? Like, how did you not let it slow you down?
Yeah, back to turning up the heat. Every time you do those tests, have evidence how you did it. If someone internally doesn't like something, but you could point back to hard stat and why it performed better, that will answer a lot of objections. And, just be very confident and stand up for yourself. I know that sounds small, but a lot of marketers kind of cave at the first kind of pushback from a higher up. But it's much better to hold your ground a lot of times and speak up for yourself and speak confidently on what you're doing.
Right. Okay, so what do I do if I have my customer insights and I have my content experiments planned out, that like gradual boldness, and I'm ready for objections, I think. Is it go time? Just start executing, and do I just keep, kind of going on those steps? What else is next?
It depends on the organization, right? Because the last piece is collaboration with other marketers. Unless you're at a tiny startup, you'll likely have to create content with other teammates. At PushPay, we have this videographer. Her name is Mary Ann. She's amazing. And she does like the filming of her content. But it took a while for us to kind of find a groove. She had mostly done those kind of corporate style videos. And I'm a guy who makes, kind of ridiculous, wacky videos for LinkedIn. So it's kind of a clash of styles at first. So it was a little difficult to understand each other. So even back then, like the turning up the heat, like was the best way to figure out like how do we work, best together. And now that we've filmed at least 70, 80 videos together, and we kind of tweaked it each time, like hey, let's try this something different each time. Now we're kind of lockstep in what we do. So my other advice is figure out how to work with other marketers in your team and be able to understand their styles and how you two are going to kind of mesh the best.
Yeah. 70 to 80 videos. So many videos. And you haven't been, I mean, I guess you've been there for
a lot. I mean, a lot of them are small, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's so many videos. Okay. So understand your customers, turn up the heat gradually, be ready for objection handling, work well with your stakeholders, marketing team, the other marketers who are going to help you execute. And then wrapping all this up is the fifth step of this playbook, like just continuing to iterate and finding that groove and evolving it based on how your customers may be accepting this, new style of content that you're putting out in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's never-ending refinement. Even as the business expands, right? Like a lot of times we're going after different types of customers. Your ICPs could kind of slowly, shift in time. So you're constantly kind of evaluating the market, your customers who you're trying to go out after, and then making tweaks in your messaging to kind of match the situation. So it's a never-ending process, but that's what makes creativity fun, right? It's always a new challenge out there, and it's why I love marketing at least.
Yeah, it's super fun. I totally agree with that. Okay, and speaking of fun, part of there's in my opinion anyway, there's like three parts of the fun. There's like the aha moment when you're like, ooh, I have a good idea, like based on, maybe some insights that you're getting about your customer, like whoever is going to be on the receiving end of whatever it is that you're creating. And then there's the act of creating it can also be very fun. And then the last thing that's just very gratifying is the end result of feeling like that worked really well. So I guess help us understand how do you know when something is working versus it's just noise versus like, okay, oops, that went too far. Like, yes, the metrics, but like, is there anything else at play here in terms of, is it customer sentiment? Is it, pipeline? Like, what's your go-to, like, okay, yeah, that worked outcome?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you try something new, I'm watching engagement, click-through rates, time on content. Those are going to be kind of your early signals. But vanity metrics can kind of fool you, of course, as we all know as marketers. So I try to back a couple of things up with something happening downstream. Are leads moving? Are prospects mentioning the content in sales calls? The last one's my favorite one here. When a prospect brings it up unprompted, you actually know it kind of stuck. Like I said about that prospect message on LinkedIn, like that was a good feeling, and that was something we're heading in the right direction there. I
hope you shared that with your stakeholders.
Of course it did. And as far as like going too far, the safest protection you have is just having a few trusted customers, like I talked about earlier, that I could send something over to you before it goes live. Does this land? And then having that informal loop kind of save you from going too far, of course.
Totally. Okay. Last question for you on this topic. I feel like you've given a wealth of information already. But if you had to give one piece of advice to a product marketer who is trying to take their, the boring benefits, content about their product and just make it a bit more bold, like what's one piece of advice you would give to that PMM?
I'd say work on being more creative. And I always hated when PMMs say like I'm not creative, right? Creativity is a muscle. Like, yes, some of it is innate. We're all not going to be Andy Warhol, but everyone can be, better at being creative. So just practice it. That's honestly why I make like the silly videos that I do on LinkedIn, because I get my storytelling reps in. So on the job, I have that practice. So it just becomes so much easier to break down a product story in my head because I've already gotten those reps in. But for the audience, it doesn't have to be videos. It could be short stories, like take an improv class, draw something from scratch. There's a million ways to practice that creativity, and every PMM out there should be.
I love that advice. I feel like in my own career, I've gone through phases of feeling like, oh, I'm not creative, to, having that validation of like, well, I put the practice in. To your point, I did the reps. So such a great tip and such a good story. I think so many PMMs out there would leave content up to other marketers, but when it comes to being about your product and engaging with your customers, I feel like PMMs should have a seat at the table for, if not driving it, for some of this kind of content. So
and that's the fun type of marketing. I'm not a product marketer that just likes to live in frameworks. I want to see this thing come to life. So I honestly, like, I know it's kind of hard and it could be kind of challenging, but I promise you, if you take messaging and then you see it come to life, that's the most satisfying part of the job, at least in my opinion.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, so now it's time for the next segment of the show. This is the messaging critique. This is where, as marketing or product marketing experts, Stefan, you and I get to analyze real world marketing. And the fun part is that you get to pick the company that we'll be talking about. Just to set some quick ground rules. You are going to pick a company that is one that you are familiar with, either the market yourself or you are part of the customer base. Would not be fair to critique messaging on a company whose customers we know nothing about. And then, then tell me what you're loving about it, what stands out. What do you wish the PMM would have considered differently? And then we'll brainstorm a little bit on how that PMM could take it to the next level.
Sounds good.
So without further ado, please reveal the company we'll be looking at today.
Yeah, we're looking at Vidyard. So I use these guys quite a bit in my job. So I'm at least familiar with their product a little bit.
So I'm going to pull up their website, and we'll just kind of go from there based on how they present themselves on their website. Granted, I understand that sometimes PMMs don't get a say in what's going on the website, but in theory, whoever created the website is probably using messaging that the PMM made. Okay, so walk us through the messaging itself. And then, by the way, I'm going to vidyard.com. Let me know if that's the right one, Stefan. Is it VID, then yard, YARD.com?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, cool. So walk us through, just kind of give us an overview of who do you think this is for, and what is their kind of messaging and story based on how they're presenting themselves on the web.
Yeah, so Vidyard is a video hosting platform. So basically, instead of sending someone a YouTube link, you send them a Vidyard link. And on the back end, you can see exactly who watched it, how long they watched, and whether they dropped off. So it's basically video with kind of a CRM layer on top. I would say it's primarily for B2B sales teams and marketers. Sales reps use it more for sending personalized video messages to prospects. And marketing teams like myself use it more for hosting and tracking video content purposes.
Cool. Okay. And what's their story? What's their messaging? I'm looking at their website here, and I don't want to give too much away, but the first thing it's not the first part of the messaging itself, but the first thing that jumps out at me is just their big, bold header that says video for every customer moment. But yeah, you tell us, what's the messaging here?
And I actually like the hero. As I'm looking at their messaging, I think it's a pretty solid hero. I mean, it has some jargon like AI powered and scaled trust, but video for every customer moment, kind of makes sense for me. I mean, that's kind of what they do as a sales rep, use it throughout the prospecting. That has some automation services, to help do that. It's kind of a little creepy, but you can create an AI avatar of yourself. Even
that is so creepy, but also kind of
people,
cool.
People like it, right? And they list the target audience and the hero. So for revenue teams, that'd be the marketers and sales. That makes sense. And they list their main features, right? So it's video that's personal, trackable, and embedded in your tool. So I think that's where they kind of do well, is in the hero here. And overall on the homepage, I think they use a lot of screenshots as well. I can look at this page and have a pretty good idea on what they're selling. And maybe that's maybe that sounds like a low bar, but a lot of times at B2B, I'm on the homepage okay, what exactly is this?
I know. I actually agree. And I don't think I would be in the exact, maybe it would be actually, target audience. I love the hero copy here. Yeah. Just the big, bold, video for every customer moment really resonates with me. Yeah. And it causes me to want to dig deeper, to be ooh, what do you mean? Ooh, where? Ooh, well, which moments? Okay. So what can so it's intriguing. So I think they've done a really great job with that. And I also agree. I like product imagery on a website. Again, we're not here to critique the website, but I do like that as part of the product storytelling, just because in B2B, you can be talking to so many different stakeholders. So it helps create some context for me as I'm looking at the website to see what your product is and can it do the things that I am looking to do. So I think it's helpful for that. So I don't want to, take too much away. It sounds like you see some things that are working really well. What are some things that you wish the PMM would have considered differently?
Okay, this one's probably a UX one. but it bothers me a lot. Okay, so the logos underneath the hero are a trick. You look at that and you think those logos are social proof. They must use Vidyard, but that's not what they are. So that's not that Salesforce uses it. It's actually just integrations.
Oh yes, use it with your existing stack. You're right.
Did that fool you too? That fooled me, and I was like, "Oh, Salesforce uses them. That's really cool." But then it's actually the integration. So it's kind of a trick because it's just good most DB websites.
Yeah, because most people they are just skimming.
Yeah,
and so they just see the logos, and they're like, "Okay, got it. Those are the customers. Got it." I was even gonna say I like that they have the customer proof right at the top. Because typically something about like the stack would be closer to the bottom.
Right. So a little tricky there, but I'll give them that. You gotta play those games in marketing sometimes. So
sometimes you roll the dice.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would roll the dice, but
yeah, I wouldn't roll the dice there, but yeah. Sure.
To each their own. All right.
And I think the jargon gets, a little crazy in some areas. Look beneath the hero, you see like the built for modern teams. If I always think like as opposed to what is anybody building for teams in the 1950s, right? Like what does that mean?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And and win deals, scaling what's working. I mean, it's good. It's just stuff that I've read a million times before. And back to the earlier points here, I think it's more surface level rather than dealing with actual pain points. And another small thing, I think they say like AI powered 5 times on a page, which they use a lot of AI. I'll give them that, but AI powered is one of those buzzwords that bothers me.
Yeah, slow down. Yeah, slow down, cowboy. All right. Yeah. So what advice do you have to their PMMs or how could they take it to the next level? There's a couple things here that they could fix, but is there more to the story in your opinion?
Yeah, I like the video there on the top right. I think they do a good job. Is like a walkthrough.
Oh, cool.
It feels pretty, generic, very corporate. Like there's almost like too much lighting, which I don't know. That perfectly polished image, I feel like doesn't work well nowadays in a lot of settings. But I would think about how to make this, more entertaining, right? If I were them. So for this, how do we tell a story here? So let's actually flip the script and tell the story of not the seller or the marketer, but of their customer. So let's say in this video, we show a customer's inbox filled with 10,000, marketing spam emails, right? And customers just kind of rolling their eyes and deleting them. And then one email comes in with like a personalized video and it talks about the exact problem they're experiencing in their industry. They find the content worthwhile and they've already seen the face of the sellers. They feel comfortable, reaching out for more information. Having that kind of a tweak where you add a story to it to start the video would be a lot more powerful than just kind of a basic intro. So that's what I would kind of recommend is from a storytelling aspect.
I love that. And something that, if they wanted some ideas on, I guess, like where to get started for some of that storytelling, maybe they could, continue with the story that they've already placed at the top of their website with video for every customer moment. Like what moments? Like I want to see, and like what you kind of described is one of those moments.
Right.
So I would be so cool. I mean, maybe they have this. They might have this already and I'm, Captain Obvious or something, but it would be really cool from a campaign perspective to do a campaign that was like customer moments.
Yeah.
And then it was all of those little engagements or interactions that you just described, but they could do that. They could do that for like every member of the buy team too. So,
I like
so good. Yeah, so good. Okay, Vidyard, you can hire us.
Please reach out.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Is there anything else you want to mention about Vidyard before we wrap up this segment?
No, I think we talked about them enough. I use their product. I don't want to insult them too much. I like their product. So good job, Vidyard.
Yeah. It does look really cool. Really cool. Okay. Shout out Vidyard. We really like the start that you have with some of your storytelling. And we have some ideas for you. So consider it. Let us know what you think. Okay. So Stefan, one thing that I like to make space for on this podcast is a moment of gratitude. I know that in product marketing, none of us get to where we are without others who have taught us and mentored us and showed us the way. And by you coming on here and sharing your playbook, and it's helping to mentor and educate others in the communities. And so I'm grateful for it. And I'm sure everyone out there listening right now is too. So thank you so much for being on the show. And then also, before we wrap up, I wanted to turn it around and see if you had any PMMs that you wanted to give any shout outs to. Part of the gratitude moment is for you to be able to give some kudos to the PMMs who have shaped you into the amazing product marketer that you are.
Yeah, I wasn't always like a super creative PMM. Like I used to be a pretty conventional, stuffy product marketer.
We have all been that conventional, stuffy product marketer.
And if you look at some of my stuff and you wonder why it's a little unhinged, and it's because I was shown by others that product marketing like doesn't have to be stale and it could be fun. And one guy who I think best exemplifies this is Zach Messler. I remember my early LinkedIn influencing days, seeing his stuff and thinking like, okay, this guy's like funny and weird, and weird in a good way. I say that in a perfectly good way. And I thought about that, and I was like, well, maybe I don't have to be, boring either. Maybe I don't have to copy this kind of same kind of stuffy formula with frameworks and everything like that. And I've had, several conversations with him since then. I've always loved, hearing his stories and taking his advice. So, thank you to Zach. You definitely walked so us other weirdos could run. So I appreciate it.
I love it. Oh, so great. I don't know. I have to get connected with him. And
he's a great guy. Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Okay. And this is my last question for you. Where else is it best to get some access to those unhinged videos? Is it best to just follow you and add you on LinkedIn, or are there other places where you can find your work?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place. I have a YouTube channel as well, just under my own name. Other than that, always feel free to DM me on LinkedIn. Always happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Sounds good. Again, thank you so much, Stefan. This was so great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And hey, PMM listeners, if you liked this episode, please share it with a PMM friend. I would be so grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps tremendously with our reach. Thank you so much for coming on this adventure with us today. I hope this episode leaves you with inspiration to take in the next step of your own journey.